Welcome back. I hope you all managed to grab a cup of tea or some water or coffee or something. We're back here in the Euskalduna Conference Center in Bilbao, and we are about to start the magical panel. We have a great panel for you this afternoon, and I'd like to introduce you to them all briefly first before going to the first question. So basically our panel consists of State Secretary Mateja Ribic from the Ministry of Labour, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities, representing the Slovenian EU Council Presidency. We have a member of the European Parliament, Marianne Wind. We have Teresa Moitinho here representing the European Commission. We have Marianne Skapman, Head of the Office of Working Conditions, the Health and Safety Unit from the ETUI, the European Trade Union Institute. We have Rebecca Smith, who is Deputy Director of the Social Affairs Department in Business Europe. And finally, last but by no means least, we have here in person, as opposed to remotely, we have William Coburn, my colleague, who is the head of our Prevention and Research Unit. So welcome to all my panelists. It's lovely to see you. And I want to thank you all for making the effort to be with us today. I know it's not easy, and I know some of you are on holidays, and you've made really, a great effort to come along. So thank you. It's very, very much appreciated. So I hope that you managed to see some of the conversation that Krista had with Commissioner Schmidt, because I could see that he was trying to emphasize some parts of the new EU strategic framework that we're all now so interested in. And I'd like to ask you all a little opening question, and you're allowed to expand for 3 minutes to set out your stall. I'll come back to you later with other ones. Might I start with you, Rebecca Smith from Business Europe? It strikes me that digitalisation seems to be at the heart of everything they're doing in the European Union right now. And of course, the Commissioner rightly emphasised the absolutely transformative influence it's been having on our work in the past and will have on the way we work in the future. What are your views about digitalisation and the challenges and opportunities, Rebecca? And what else are you thinking now that you've read the new EU-OSHA strategic framework?
Well, good afternoon, Brenda. Good afternoon, all the fellow panelists and to everybody present here. And it's lovely to be back in the OSHA world with friends and colleagues. I haven't seen you all for a while, and even if it's not in person now, it's really nice to be part of the conversation again. So on the issue of digitalization, clearly, I mean, we completely agree. This is at the core of a lot of what we're working on at Business Europe, and of course there are OSH challenges, but also huge OSH opportunities with the digital transformation. It's important that we not only deal with those challenges where they arise, but also that we make the most of this and we grasp the opportunities for less dangerous work, for more automated work. Of course, that means people need different skills, and as employers, we're often lacking people with the right skills to do these new jobs within the digital transformation. So that's really an important point for us. But clearly, we need a balanced approach to this. I would mention also our Social Partners Framework Agreement on Digitalisation, which has to be implemented now by our members and trade unions across Europe, which includes aspects on health and safety, amongst many other things, actually. And then in general, on the strategic framework, we see, of course, the need for a strategic framework at European level. So we're supportive of having this forward-looking agenda, and I think that overall the priorities that are set in the framework are the right ones. Of course, we have to carry on with the good work that's been done in the previous strategic frameworks, but we also need to learn the lessons from the pandemic, and there are key OSH lessons to learn from the pandemic, as well as, of course, making the most of these opportunities and dealing with the challenges in the world of work from the digital transition, the green transition. So overall, we're pleased with the focus of the strategic framework. And in general, we support most of the tools that are proposed, probably not all of them, but that's always in the detail. And of course, it's a strategic framework that is supposed to provide a compromise across the different stakeholders' views. But I think in particular what this strategic framework importantly highlights is that we already have a very good OSH framework. We have really substantial improvements over the last few years in OSH, down to good national EU legislation, also down to actions by social partners. And it's important that social partners and this tripartite approach that we have on OSH, that's also, of course, reflected in OSHA itself, is really at the heart of everything that we do. I mean, we see real progress when all of the partners have a constructive attitude and we work on issues where we have a common ground, and that really can make a lot of progress in these areas. I think when it comes to anticipating and managing change, we need flexible tools, because things happen so quickly, changes happen so quickly on the labour markets that we can't have rigid tools. We need flexible tools so that companies and workers can adapt. Of course, employers and workers have different rights and obligations when it comes to the OSH legislation. It's important to distinguish between these, but working together on these issues is really the best way forward. I think, of course, we need to be prepared for future pandemics. Unfortunately, I think that already the OSH framework that we have really proved its worth during this crisis. The prevention principles, which was importantly highlighted by Commissioner Schmidt, was really important there, as well as all of the existing risk assessment procedures. I mean, they really showed that the OSH structure and the way that we work on OSH works well. But of course, we also have to learn the lessons from the pandemic. That means for us in particular, having a much better interaction between public health policies and workplace health and safety policies. It makes no sense to ensure that workers are protected from these kind of viruses at the workplace if they're not protected outside the workplace as well. So we need a much better interaction between those two policy areas. We maybe have one point of criticism to the strategic framework, and that is that the Commission now is proposing to qualify COVID-19 as an occupational disease. We've already discussed this a lot in policy debates. For us, this should be a decision for the national level. We know that some member states have gone in this direction, but we need to be very careful in not suggesting that the pandemic is caused at the workplace. Of course, we know that workers are exposed to this, and of course, we know that in some sectors are exposed much more directly to the pandemic because of the kind of tasks that they do. But this is a pandemic. This is at large in society, and we must make sure that we don't run the risk of focusing only on the workplace when we need measures across the board. And for us, qualifying this as an occupational disease is not really going in the right direction. Okay. Then, of course, we know that there will be reviews of different pieces of legislation. Of course, we agree that where legislation needs to be modernized, this should be done, but it shouldn't be changing legislation for the sake of changing it. We need to make sure that change is going to bring around real improvements on the ground, make it simpler for companies to implement legislation. Of course, as the Commissioner rightly said, legislation is only as good as its implementation. And so we really need to make sure that whatever changes are made to modernise different directives, that this actually makes a difference on the ground. And
Okay,
I'll
thank you
stop there
very
for
much.
now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that rather comprehensive set of opinions, I must say. Thank you very much. I think we'll be coming back to that integration of public health and OSH idea later, along with many other things you touched upon. I'd like to go now to Marianne Scapman, please. Also in terms of the digitalization is touching everything and has been for a long time, both in the strategic framework and in the conversation that the commissioner had just now with Krista. He touched on the world of contractual relationships, the problematic around what is the definition of an employee. How do we protect all workers? He said, and I quote, what we must also protect the entrepreneurs and the self-employed. What do you think about that, Marianne?
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you very much. And first of all, thanks to EU-OSHA as well for organizing this very important event. I mean, to celebrate the new OSH strategic framework. And I think it is something to celebrate. It's really something good. I greet you from the most southern point of Europe, by the way, which you might be able to see on the background here. So not many psychosocial risks around here. Digitalization, yeah, it is actually the change, the digital change, the green change. It's one of the key objectives of the strategic framework, and rightly so. There is so much change in the world of work, and it's going further and further and faster. And indeed, you mentioned, and also the commissioner mentioned, protection of everybody that works. So OSH is there for everybody that works, not only for workers in the contractual sense. And there we have a key element: who bears the burden of the change and who profits. It also relates to the keynote speaker's remarks. And then actually I can come to my comment on the strategic framework in a more broader sense. I think the key objectives are great. They are relevant, they are on point, they cover a lot of things. Digital and green change, digital and green transition. The question here is it a just transition? And how can we contribute out of our OSH perspective to that? Second one, prevention, the key element in OSH regulation. Rebecca rightly mentioned the fact that our legal framework in OSH is fantastic. It has this key element in it, and prevention indeed is key, and now more than ever. Prevention also has a hierarchy of prevention. I want to mention that as well. I mean, it's not individuals only on the individual level, but we have a hierarchy of prevention that we need to follow. Third, preparedness, also a very important. I mean, it's logic in this time and age that it's there. So key objectives are great. It's missing, and I try to respect the 3 minutes. So there's much more to say, but now to come to an element that I really find, and the unions really find missing in this strategic framework, and that is as underpinning element to arrive to the key objectives, we really need good regulation. And I mentioned good regulation a little bit as opposed to better regulation, because better regulation has been framed in a way as to cut red tape, to simplify. It has got a bit of that notion. Good regulation for is something. It doesn't have the cut tape as the key element. It has have simplification as the key element, though those elements can play a role. But of course, most important in good regulation is the purpose of having good occupational health and safety impact. So that is good regulation. It's and one example here of this, the importance of this, is the issue of psychosocial risks. It is mentioned as a very important issue in the strategic framework, but the measures that are being mentioned are far from enough. One of my colleagues even said are totally inadequate. EU-OSHA research shows that the main reason that motivates enterprises to manage OSHA is fulfilling the legal obligation. So the degree to which psychosocial risks are included or explicitly mentioned in the legislation varies significantly between the member states. Consequently, and there it is again, inequality, workers are not protected to the same level across the countries. Mere guidance on PSR is, alas, highly unlikely to protect workers from PSR. Since my time is over, I will stop here. I have a lot more to say to this, and I look forward to the exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marianne. And I will come back to you. Don't worry. There are many things we can talk about. I'd like to just go now to the representative of the governments, and indeed representing the presidency of the European Union, Slovenia, Mateja Ribic. It's interesting to note that in the new EU-OSHA strategic framework, there is talk, and not just talk, but mention of specific funds and increased resources for labour inspectorates mentioned therein. What is your view of that? And do you think this information will go down well with the other governments of the European Union?
Well, thank you, Brenda, and good afternoon from Slovenia, from Ljubljana to everyone. I must say that I was very glad the invitation that I had for this conference, because I think it's a very important conference, and it's really my pleasure to be here with you. So about the EU strategic framework on health and safety at work, I think, and we in Slovenia think that all EU members should update their national legal frameworks in consultation with social partners, of course, to address all these OSH risks and opportunities related to the green and digital transition. Member states should also focus on the use of digital tools to make labor markets, to make labor inspection more efficient by both preventing and detecting breaches of legislation. We noticed that a number of new OSH risks are emerging from the rise of platform economy, teleworking, new forms of employment, global supply chains, also new business models, not to mention this year the pandemic. And like Commissioner Smith said, we also noticed that the mental disease are increasing, and the cure this mental disease are very often not easy. So we think that if we want to improve the level of safety and health at work in the European Union, we need to do 5 things, 5 very important things. The first one is to modernize and strengthen the national labor inspectorates. The second one is to provide better training for labor inspectors and to equip them with right skills and knowledges. The third one is to improve the exchange of information and good practice between the national labor inspectorates and other important authorities. And the last one is that we need to strengthen the role of SLIC and ELA. And all of these are also in one or another way goals of the new strategic framework. And I would also like to stress that the capacity building of the labor inspectorates of the Republic of Slovenia is also part of the Slovenian resolution of the National Programme of Health and Safety at Work, which was already adopted by the National Assembly of the Republic of Slovenia. And we also think, like Commissioner Smith said, that the very important thing is the right to disconnect. I think that this right is very important, and we need to put this right into the legislative, all member states. And like I said at the beginning, I would really like to stress that all member states should update their national frameworks. And this is very important, that not that they just update them, they need to update them with the social partners, with trade unions, with employers, and also, on the other hand, with government. We think that this is really important, the collaborations of all three parties, because this is the only way that we can make our jobs, our workplaces safer, healthier, and even more productive.
Well, thank you very much for that very comprehensive answer on the whole role and the need for the greater resourcing of labour inspectorates. Thank you very much, Madam Riebrich. I'm going to be coming back to you later with some other questions. I'm going to move on to our next panellist to see what she's up to. This is Marianne Wind, who is a member of the European Parliament. And of course, you're very welcome here today. I am wondering, what have been the most important lessons you have learned for worker health and safety during the pandemic? We note your work in the Employment Committee of the European Parliament in the healthcare sector regarding seasonal workers, and also the work you've done on the right to disconnect. We'd be very interested to hear what your comments are on some of these issues, and indeed on the new OSH strategic framework.
Thank you, and thank you for the word, and thank you to EU-OSHA for arranging this very important event. I would like first to take an opportunity to warmly welcome the strategic framework for health and safety at work presented last week. It's very welcome. The recent year with COVID-19 has taught us that our labour markets are developing very fast, and a lot has been changed since the last strategy 7 years ago. I will start by welcoming the vision of zero work-related death in the strategic framework. This vision is probably the biggest contribution of the strategic framework for health and safety at work. It is time for Europe to finally state that no one should risk their life on going to work every day. It is of most importance that all EU member states implement this vision. This vision does not only count for accidents at work, it must also cover long-term illnesses such as cancer. In my opinion, there is a lot that can be done from member states to strengthen their labour authorities and implement strong national strategies in this field. Firstly, we need to be significantly more ambitious. I believe that a target year of 2030 should be more strongly implemented in the strategy. And we need to step up the work on asbestos and the CMD4. The most inclusion of hazardous medical products are of most importance. Additionally, strong measures for implementation must be considered. The EU has many tools in the toolbox to protect the life of mobile workers. We need to secure enforcement through European Labour Authority. We need to secure cross-border inspections. We need to have a European personal labour card. That way we can make sure that the vision also comes true. And another point is the mental health in Europe. Right now we are online working from our offices. This has been done for more than a year, and it's crazy what happened for so short time. I think we have all experienced stress, enormous workloads, insecurities with this new time of working. Pandemic, I see a momentum to discuss mental health all over Europe. It is time to present a directive on mental health at workplace. A framework directive that takes stress seriously and requires workplaces to develop strategies to tackle it, to educate managers with staff responsibility, to combat stress and harassment of any kind, and to present a directive for teleworking and to implement a right to disconnect, as you mentioned, in order to provide safety for European workers. A Europe with better mental health starts also at our workplaces. I wish for a Europe that improves mental health for every worker, and I see no better place to start this journey than with the new strategic framework on health and safety at work. So thank you for your time. I really look forward to working together with you.
Thank you very much, Mariana. I definitely see some other questions coming in that I'll be coming back to you on, in fact, coming back to all of you on. But I would move on first to our dear colleague, Teresa Moitinho from the European Commission. Now, following on from your commissioner, Teresa, I know you don't want to go into all of the ins and outs, but it is interesting that already some big picture issues have come up. That issue of integrating public health with occupational safety and health, as mentioned by Rebecca Smith. The cross-policy areas like public health that we've talked about before, strengthening the evidence base, global supply chains. What's it been like for you, Teresa? Where do you see now the impetus coming for the implementation of the new EU strategic framework?
Thank you very much, Brenda. And it is really a great pleasure for me to participate today in this event, as indeed it is a very special and important moment for health and safety at work, and for us in the Commission services in particular, because it was after 1 year of intensive work on developing, stock taking, extensive consultations, that the Commission adopted this ambitious and inclusive strategic framework for the next 7 years. I have listened carefully what the previous speakers have referred, and I think that we all agree on certain aspects of this now, the work that we have in front of us. For the implementation of this strategic framework, it is fundamental to have this tripartite approach. We can only implement all the actions and initiatives that are foreseen, and so fulfilling the three key objectives laid down in the strategic framework, if we will really adopt this tripartite approach and we will work together. Indeed, one of the points that I listened, it was exactly linked to the need to ensure effective application and enforcement of the rules that are laid down, and also inclusive of the guidance that are also adopted at European level. And in this regard, I think that it will be very important the role of the member states together with the social partners. when they will adopt or update their national OSH strategies in light of the new strategic framework. And this would really require very target and determined or decisive actions regarding raising awareness, effective enforcement, supporting of all actors to achieve the objectives that we all are pursuing. I will join the other speakers to say that indeed prevention is a key rule of our policy area. And it's the golden rule since the framework directive, as one of the speakers said, that it is in our hierarchy of prevention measures. And the prevention implies really the promotion of this zero vision approach that the new strategic framework is putting forward. It's one of the highlights of our new framework. And this will require the need to assess and study the causes of each work-related death or big main injuries. We need really to identify the causes and analysis the roots for such events, sad events that occurred in the workplace. We also need to deploy actions to raise awareness, to promote this prevention culture among everybody. We need to also promote capacity building of all actors, and again, reinforce enforcement, as this is essential to really achieve such objective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Very interesting. And you covered a lot there, I have to say. Thank you. So finally, in this first round, I'd like to come to our colleague, William Coburn, because here in the agency, for example, our work program was adopted last year. So William, were your hands trembling when you opened the new EU strategic framework last week? Were you worried that our work program was not complementary to the intentions contained within the new OSH strategic framework? Or, on the other hand, were you pleasantly surprised?
Thank you, Brenda, and good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon to fellow panelists. It's been a pleasure to listen to the comments so far. Regarding your question, Brenda, I would refer back to the stock-taking exercise that the Commission carried out of the previous strategy, and EU-OSHA had a strong role there in the implementation of that strategy, and that came through very strongly in the stock-taking exercise. So let's say I was positively anticipating the new strategic framework, and as previous speakers have said, I think it's an excellent and timely document that's really hitting the nail on the head on the priorities. When we're looking at the EU-OSHA's role in this regard in implementing the strategic framework and supporting all of the actors playing its part in the jigsaw that you mentioned at the beginning, I think there are two main areas. One is supporting and ensuring a solid evidence base. And we heard from Professor Marmot and saw the importance of good and reliable data for guiding policy and action, and also for monitoring progress. And the other main area is on capacity building, particularly in terms of, from our perspective, providing adequate tools and guidance and being able to raise awareness about occupational safety and health risks. Speaking about the evidence base, the tools that we have at our disposal are basically our foresight exercises, the scenario-based foresights, our 3-year research-led activities, which we term OSH overviews, and of course our surveys. At the moment, we have the foresight ongoing on the circular economy, and that'll be reporting next year. We've got OSHA overviews currently underway on digitalisation and on supporting compliance, so they're referring to many of the priorities that we've just heard. And we'll be initiating next year and have already started preparing for an OSHA overview on psychosocial risks, the following year on healthcare and the care sector. And we take note of the emphasis on circulatory diseases in the strategic framework, and we'll be putting forward a proposal on that for an OSHA overview to our management board after that. We've also been very active in terms of surveys. We have our well-established ESSENA survey asking more than 45,000 establishments across Europe about how they manage health and safety at work in practice. 3 rounds of that have been completed, the last one in 2019. And we'll do the next one in 2024. But we're also piloting a very exciting new survey that speaks directly to the priority on cancer prevention, and that's the Workers' Exposure Survey on cancer-causing factors at work. The final survey I'd like to mention is also a new pilot collaboration, and that's with the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee, actually a survey of inspectors on the ground, asking them their opinion about health and safety risks. So I think we've got a lot of data there. We're going to be pulling all of that together in the OSH Barometer, which is our dashboard that has been online now for nearly a year and getting a lot of attention from our policy audience. Just touching on the capacity building then, I mentioned tools, and of course our OIRA, our online interactive risk assessment tool activity, is going from strength to strength, and that'll continue over the strategy period. We've got 260 OIRA tools already developed, covering different member states and sectors, another 70 in development, and we do that in conjunction with our 16 member state partners and also the EU sectoral social partners. The Commissioner mentioned our COVID guidelines, which are mentioned in the strategic framework as well, and they, of course, will be updated. In the context of our campaigns, we collect the wealth of knowledge that is out there. In fact, we have databases of good practice from the Dangerous Substances campaign and the MSDs campaign, and they both have well over 1,000 examples of good practices, tools, and guidance. And of course, you're familiar with the campaign. It's the largest OSH campaign in the world, and without our network of focal points, and of course the collaboration of the social partners, we wouldn't be able to make it the success that it is. So to round up, I think I'd say I'm confident that the long-term planning we have in place will be excellent support. And we very much look forward to the stock-taking OSH summit that the Commission has planned for 2023 in the strategy, and supporting the strategy as part of that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we haven't mentioned that, the stock-taking summit that's also mentioned in the strategy, which will take place in 2023, which sounds really exciting. Great idea. Loads of questions coming in. How shall I sort them? Okay, I'm going to take one really quick fire one, and I'd like to aim this to the employers and to the workers. I'm going to give you both a shot at this question. Do we need legislation to tackle psychosocial risks? Because we've been trying to improve them for a long, long time. And it would appear that the figures around psychosocial risks in the workplace are not reassuring. What is your view, Marianne? Let me ask you first, Marianne Skapman.
Thank you, Brenda. Well, the answer is very short, yes. But of course, you want a little more. Why do we need legislation for psychosocial risks? Psychosocial risks, work-related psychosocial risks, is a risk like all other work-related risks. It's there in the workplace. It is part of how work is organized. It is psychosocial risks that are work-related are being caused by the work, by the way work is organized, by a too heavy workload, by by not having enough support from your manager or your colleagues, by being isolated, working in an isolated manner. So it's in the work, and like all other risks, we need to apply the hierarchy of prevention. So avoid the risk, or apply collective measures, and at the final stage, protect the individual. So it is just a normal risk, and we have many specific directives for other risks and not for this one. Another element that is really why it is so important to have this legislation at European level, because research shows, and it's a well-known fact, that psychosocial risks are being regulated very differently in the 27 member states. So there are member states with a good body of legislation in place, with real targeted measures in it, and there are countries that have nothing, and therefore the protection of workers in this respect is different in different member states. So it's a part of the work organization, a risk like all the others. And
thank you very much.
Inequality.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. That question came from the German trade union Verdi, from Armin Dutin, but a similar question, or one touching on the subject, also reached us from the Canary Islands. So, Rebecca Smith, what are your views on this? Do we keep on going as we are, or do we look for more regulation?
So on this, I mean, without wanting to create a polemic between the two sides of the social partners, no, we don't believe that we need legislation on this issue. We have the framework directive, and I hear completely what Marianne said, that of course we have a lot of other specific health and safety directives, but actually we don't like this proliferation of directives, because what you get is the overall framework directive, which has a very clear risk assessment procedure, which applies to all risks. It applies to psychosocial risks. And then you have slightly different procedures in a lot of different directives. And actually that doesn't help the employers or the workers to make progress on these issues, because they have to deal with a patchwork of processes. So we believe the framework directive is the authoritative one, including on the issue of psychosocial risks. What we would like to see is more guidance on how to apply that directive in this area. But also, I mean, from a content point of view, all the things that Marianne mentioned, relationship with colleagues, how the work is organized, how is the work managed, what is even the company culture, how do individuals deal with this? We don't believe that those are issues that are best dealt with through legislation. We believe that those issues can differ from one company to another. They can differ from one individual to another. We all deal with these issues in different ways. So what we would rather have is guidance, support, involvement of social partners, including at the company level, to deal with these issues. But we don't think that legislation is best placed to do that.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Rebecca, because, you know, it's interesting. We're getting quite a few questions in about legislation. I have a question for the State Secretary, Madame Rebic. Given the proliferation of teleworking in the future, in the post-COVID-19 era, do we need new legislation on teleworking?
Yes, I think that we need a new legislation because, like I said before, the right to disconnect is a very important right. And if we look at the Slovenian legislation, we don't have this right yet, but we do have already some conversation with social partners about how to include this right into our legislation. During the pandemic, we really encouraged employers and workers to work from home. And if we look at the numbers, we can see that 30 to 40% of workers were working from home. And we must realize that working from home does not have only good points, but it also has some bad points. Because workers they usually think that they need to be connected all the time, from the morning till the night, and that they need to be for their employees really all the day for him available. And this can also lead to some disease, like I mentioned. Psychosocial disease are increasing, and these mental disease are very often not easy to cure. And because of that, yes, I think that we need to change some legislation, and that we need to improve it, because this is the only way that we can protect our workers on the other side and also the employers on the other side.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So a quick question from Ireland, and I'm going to let the panel volunteer. I'm not going to nominate someone. So do we plan or have an overview on sanctions and penalty practices in the EU member states? Is such an overview planned during the strategy period? So who'd like to take that interesting question? I was wondering, would maybe Teresa Moitinho like to answer that, but maybe not. Is it planned, Teresa? Yeah.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. You know that there is the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee, and its tasks is to promote equivalent and effective enforcement of the European Union legislation on health and safety at work across the European Union. Of course, that one of the aspects, it's also exchange of knowledge, of experience, of practices among enforcement rules across the member states. Currently, there is not yet a specific task that SLIC would have committed on having this overview of sanctions or penalties during the strategic framework. But this is something that is addressed in several moments of the work of the Senior Labour Inspector Committee.
Ah, okay. Thank you very much for explaining that. Marianne Vint, I'd like to ask you a question. I'm not sure it's targeted to you. I know we do some work on it in the agency. I'd be interested to know what your view is from Denmark. Patrice Fourlani in Luxembourg says that the new strategy is lacking in introducing occupational safety and health at an early age, in school, at a very early age. Children should learn about OSH. So do you teach that in Denmark? Because we've certainly done some projects in the agency. I wonder what your view is.
I think it sounds like a very good idea. I know in the schools in Denmark they're talking about harassment in school, how children can participate to each other in school. But real talking about the labor market, it could be much more. I know health and safety is a huge part of education for skilled workers in Denmark. But we could start before. I think it's a very good idea. Thank you for that.
Yeah, William, would you like to comment on just very briefly on the projects we've done in this area? Might be interesting for our Luxembourger questioner.
Yeah, for sure, Brenda. I mean, it's the importance of mainstreaming OSH into education, whether that's primary education all the way through to vocational education. And we've been collaborating for a long time now with the European Network on Education and Training in OSH, organising joint events, and making the most of the material that we produce. For example, our NAPO videos that are language free and really lend themselves very well to raising awareness and education in schools. And the campaign that we have on the go at the moment, Lighten the Load, around MSDs has proved especially relevant when it comes to children carrying heavy loads in their backpacks or increasingly using digital devices, and already early on raising awareness about the importance of good ergonomic health.
Thank you. I'm just reading some of the questions that are coming in. Question in French. Shouldn't prevention be all about protecting the most fragile of workers, and particularly migrant workers and women? So, who would like to have a go at that? Oh, I think, are we having sound problems or is nobody volunteering? Right, well, maybe then I'll have to pick a victim. Perhaps looking at the particular issue of migrant and women workers from the point of view of prevention, should we be looking at strengthened measures? What do you think? What do you think, Rebecca Smith?
I knew you were going to come to me. I could feel it. Yeah, I mean, of course, all of the health and safety legislation applies to all of the workers. So that's the first important thing. But I mean, yeah, of course, we agree that there are some particular groups in society that may need targeted support. I think migrant workers, one of the very basic issues that is often arises in health and safety is they simply may not speak the language in the country that they're living in, so they don't necessarily understand the information that they're receiving. And of course, having rules in place is one thing, but understanding them and knowing what you have to do as a worker, you know that you need to wear a mask, you need to put a hard hat on, you need to wear gloves. I mean, very concrete things like that. If you don't speak the language, then it's very difficult. So tools and help for particular groups is really important, I think. Yeah, maybe. Hopefully that answers a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Marianne, I'm going to ask you this question, but if any other panelist would like to come in on it, I'm thinking maybe our Member of Parliament, feel free, but I'm going to ask you this question, which is a very thoughtful one. How could prevention be an integrated part of developing new sustainable workplace innovations to meet the needs for climate change, low carbon emissions, and just transition in times of rapid digitalisation? Now, I realise that that's a very thoughtfully framed question and it covers a multitude, but if you'd maybe like to just pick out one of these issues regarding the needs for climate change, low carbon emissions. Thank you.
Which Marianne are you targeting?
I was thinking of Marianne Skapman.
Okay.
And the other Marianne can certainly come in then if you'd like. Okay, Marianne Skapman.
I find it a really complicated question. I mean, it was such a long phrase. Can you just, you know, in a few words?
It's how can prevention be a tool in developing sustainable workplace innovations to meet the needs of climate change?
Yeah, but prevention of what? I mean, we speak about prevention of occupational diseases and illness
Yeah.
I mean, we speak about prevention in OSH. So the question relates to prevention of climate change.
Yeah,
I think so, huh?
I think maybe the question might refer to the fact that prevention is one of the 3 key pillars in the strategic framework. And we've been talking about prevention and preparedness. So maybe from that point of view, yeah.
I think I don't get the point. I mean,
Okay, well,
of course, yeah, it is a key element in the strategic framework.
yeah,
But I think the question relates to how to prevent climate change. Is that it, or is it, or how should OSH prevention contribute to climate change prevention, or how should we prevent that workers? That is maybe one element that I could relate to. How should we prevent that workers suffer from climate change? I mean, and also, how can we prevent that workers suffer from maybe a green transition that might impact workers? Those things. I mean, so, and my answer to that is, it is a consciousness that we need to have when we treat these issues. I mean, to prevent climate change is one element, is one thing, and it's really, really crucial. Don't get me wrong, but what is the impact of climate change rules on workers? How does it affect workers? I think so. Maybe there are more. There are others that want to say something about that, but for me, it's always about a just transition. So there is a transition to climate neutral world. Is it a just transition? It's the same with digitalization. There is a transition to digitalization. Is it a just transition? Does it affect, and then actually we come back to the keynote speaker's speech. It's, what is the consequence of, so thank
yeah.
you for the question anyway. I
Yeah,
had a bit of difficulties in the beginning,
yeah,
but
no,
yeah.
thank you, Mariana. And actually, you decoded that question better than I did for you, so you did a good job. But I do see that Mariana Vint would also like to come in on this topic. Please go ahead, Mariana.
That's just a short remark. It was a wonderful answer. Some of the chemicals and substances used in the companies and make a risk for the employees at the workplace is also the same chemicals and substances that make the environment outside the company give the problem for the environment outside. So if we could ban some more of these chemicals and substances, it would be better for the environment and also the workers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I see we've got far more questions than we have time for, and I know that a number of the panelists said they would also like to have a wind-up moment. So I think we'll move on to that now. So I think I'm going to ask Mateja Ribic, State Secretary of Labour, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities. As I said at the beginning, I think you wanted to say a few words about the departure of Krista Sedlacek. The floor is yours. And also, if you want to say any other concluding remarks, because we're going to close this session in 6 or 7 minutes.
Well, thank you, Brenda, for giving me the floor. Yes, I would like to say some words to Dr. Krista Sedlacek. Although, sadly, Krista, I didn't have the opportunity to meet you in person, I would like to say a few words. I must say that there is a lot of admiration for you among my colleagues. They praised your dedication and smart leadership when we discussed the EU-OSHA projects. I'm glad that at least I have this opportunity to thank you for your long standing support of our national activities. I wish you all the best, and maybe we meet in Ljubljana one day. After all, Villach is very close to Ljubljana, so you are welcome to come at our ministry. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A number of people asked if the slides of Professor Marmot will be available. Is the answer yes? The answer is yes. They will be available on the website afterwards. Many people were looking for those. Would anybody else like to say some final words? Yes, Teresa. Yes, Teresa, go ahead, and I'll come to the others then. Teresa, please.
Yes, just from my side also, on behalf of my colleagues in the unit, also to thank, of course, Krista, because I think that we are all very recognizing to Krista for the outstanding work that she made during these 2 last mandates. So on the behalf of all our colleagues in the unit, we three said many thanks, Krista.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I'm sure that's much appreciated, not only by Krista, but by all of us too. Thank you for the message, Jukka Takala. You will be able to get the slides. And thank you. Nice that you're saying hello to David Michaels in Washington. This is like a dating service here. Okay. We have some questions on Vision Zero, but I don't think we'll get to them at the moment. Now, Marianne Vint, would you like to say a few closing words?
I just want to say I look forward to this very important work with the health and safety for the next 7 years. We are in a different world than the world 7 years ago. So see you in the work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Becky, did you put your hand up?
Yes, I did.
Yes, Rebecca Smith. Rebecca, go ahead.
No, okay. So yeah, just to say thank you again to EU-OSHA for organising this.
We have a bit of a sound problem there.
She's blocked.
Yeah. So
you want me to try again?
Right. So we have a sound issue with Mariana. Mariana, we have a problem with your connection. So we're going to go to Rebecca Smith first, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
So please go ahead, Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Brenda. Just to say thanks once again to EU-OSHA for organising. I think it's been a really interesting debate. And yeah, now is really when the real work starts, at least for all of us, to implement this strategic framework. So I think the best way for us to work is to work together. And that's when we achieve the most. And it's what I said at the beginning, but I really mean that. And also just a final word to thank Krista as well for these last 10 years at the head of EU-OSHA. It's been great working with you also on behalf of the employers group of the management board. Even though I haven't been there lately, I was there at the beginning of your mandate, and we wish you lots of success afterwards. And of course, we're really looking forward to working with the new director.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to try and see if this connection with Mariana Scapman has returned. The floor is yours.
Okay.
Oh, much better.
Okay, can you hear me?
Much
Can you
better.
hear me? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, well, also from my side, again, many thanks to EU-OSHA for organizing this event. It has been really, really interesting. And I hope it has been a great exchange, and I hope it will be the start of many, many more exchanges. Indeed, I agree with Rebecca on this point. It's in cooperation that we achieve the most. And even though sometimes we are opposed to one another very fiercely, but cooperation is always the most important. And of course, I also want to say a few words to Krista. My first performance in my role as head of unit in ETUI was actually in EU-OSHA in Bilbao. It was in November 2017 on the summit. And I was welcomed by a great audience. It was a great social event as well. And of course, I had my acquaintance with Krista. And ever since, we have cooperated very well. Thank you for this great cooperation, Krista. And also for the many conversations we had either on the sidewalk, a sideway of events, or maybe on airports over a coffee. So thank you very much. It has been a great pleasure working with you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. I hope you'll stay with us because we have a short closing session coming up now, which involves the chair of our board, the return of Nicholas Schmidt, EU Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, and a final word from Krista Sedlacek herself. So if you'd like to stay with us, I really hope you do. We're going to go straight over now, I believe, to Reynars Lucis. Reynars is a little bit like Marianne Skapman in that he's on his holidays, his annual leave. He's the chair of our board, and yet he decided that he would just go back into work to be here with us today.